Welcome back to the Backseat Startup Podcast, where we give unsolicited advice to strangers on the internet.
Today I'm joined by Gregg Bieser, co-founder of Security in Motion. Gregg is an award-winning inventor specializing in Internet of Things technologies. Nomad is the latest in a series of innovative products he's created and is bringing to market. Gregg, thank you so much for being on the show.
I really appreciate the opportunity to be part of your cool and rather unique Startup Founder Daily concept.
Well, yes, this is the show where we give unsolicited advice to strangers on the internet. So we'll head over to Reddit and we'll find a question posed by a founder and you and I will break it down.
Excellent. And sadly, I did not think ahead of time to post a question that was a softball for me. I should have tried to do that.
I know you
can. Anyone who's listening, don't do that.
You can really game the system. It's true. All right. We can just go top to bottom. And if you see one that looks interesting to you, let me know.
Yes, they speak of incubators and other paths to what I'm going to call a launch pad. That's something that I can speak to with some familiarity, and I'll offer my 2 cents.
Perfect. That sounds great. So I will read it from top to bottom just for the sake of the listeners. So this post is titled, Planning Out Early Staging of a Startup and Looking for Advice on Best Practices. Hi all, I know that the best practices in starting a startup is not the founding words that would pave the way, but I'm at a dead still. Not knowing which steps to take to get my ideas off the ground, I've researched accelerator and incubator programs. As mentioned, has anyone used any of these? What are some alternative routes to take if I didn't want to go the route of an accelerator or incubator program? What do you think about that?
Interesting. So I think we so often see a startup in its rendered form and don't talk enough about how did you get it to that point. I think you first need to, and I'm offering my 2 cents. This is one path to follow, and I've followed many of them, often putting my foot into every bear trap along the way. So I can speak with some experience, and you'll have to be the judge. But I think you need to first know what you need and when you need it. And planning that out is very critical. I'm not talking just about funding, but also team building. What skills do you need? What passion and energy do you need? Can you be reflective of yourself and see where you're not going to be able to fill the bill? Now, every startup founder, if they have the passion to get past the decision to do it, to get rolling, probably is enough, but you will need help along the way, and evaluating what you need and when you need, I think, is critical. So team building is part of it. People can also improve your concept. It's a sounding board, it's a rounding board, it's a way to harden up your ideas, to find the soft spot. So the challenge of team building and knowing what you need, there are some formulae in sort of classic company build out. You need financial experience, you need marketing experience, you need sales experience, and I'm not lumping them together because they are very distinct. You need legal experience, you need just what I'm going to call advisors, your Yodas along the path to push, test, and call you a fool when you need to be called a fool, and call you brilliant when you need that as well. So I have gone through this process, and I've had the good fortune to meet people that were great startup partners, and I've also had the problem of meeting people that are horrible parts of startups. And you have to be careful that once they're on paper, you own them, unless you're working carefully. So I think a lot of people step into those traps early on, and then you lose energy because you may have someone who is either antithetical to your culture, you're working with someone who's pushing you or pulling you or not doing anything, and yet they still have a piece of your pie. I actually learned and built our current world-class team through a company called Gusher, and this isn't a commercial, but Gusher is a tremendous team building opportunity that I can describe in more detail if you wish. But you may, I don't want to. That is a subject that I'm very passionate about because it is a solution to the problem. and one where I have checked it for booby traps. In our earlier conversation, I revealed that I've learned that everything in startup land is booby trapped, everything, until you prove that it isn't.
Right.
So it sounds like you may know about Gusher.
Yeah, funnily enough, we have featured Gusher on Startup Founder Daily. They're one of our portfolio companies, as I like to call them. I'm actually meeting with someone at Gusher today because I'm close with them and we touch base fairly frequently. So I certainly echo your plug for Gusher.
Well, I'll say that its founder, Chris Joyce, has become a good friend of mine, and you cannot find a more genuinely creative and passionate startup advocate. He's made this wonderful engine for starting your company and essentially, in many ways, answer the question that we've been looking at.
Yeah, I completely agree. For those that don't know about Gusher, Gusher is a platform to basically connect you with services in exchange for equity rather than going out and raising fundraising. There's plenty of people who are looking to get involved with projects and take on side projects, freelance and whatnot. And it's a really beautiful platform to connect those who are looking for work and not really in a position or haven't raised capital, not interested in raising capital, to get some of those services and functions performed based on an equity contract rather than cash. So I'm glad to hear that because I think very highly of Gusher, and like I said, they have been featured on the show before.
Excellent. So I won't then make sure to look up that episode, listeners, because it'll be very worth your time, especially in light of the question that we're answering.
Yes, absolutely. I will include the link to that episode in the show notes. So I was curious going through this post on Reddit, and there's not very many details around here. So I don't know if the poster is asking about an accelerator, incubator for purposes of their own education, like where do I even start as an entrepreneur, or are they seeing it as the very first place to launch your startup?
Sure.
And that aspect was kind of curious to me because I don't think it's anywhere near the majority of startups that go through an incubator or an accelerator to start with. So, and I noticed the first comment actually under this post says, do the courses on YC Startup School, which I cannot recommend enough. The YouTube for Y Combinator has so many great resources. So I think that really covers that aspect in terms of building up your own education, building up your credentials as a founder. In addition to that, seeking mentors, finding people in your network and outside of your network who can shepherd you through the process, those ideally who have done it before. But on the other end, if this founder thinks that the only way to get their startup off the ground is an incubator or an accelerator, what feedback or advice do you have for them?
So I've actually had some experience in contact with incubators. Now, we've personally made the choice to not get as involved, and that is not an indictment of these excellent opportunities. There is a cadence that sometimes fits and sometimes doesn't if you become, for example, part of an incubator program. And these, of course, vary just as the nature of different types of flowers, right? You walk into an open field and you can pick flowers of every type. Naturally, incubators and related are varied. There are types where you join a cohort and essentially become, you go to Jedi school and you meet with the Jedi Masters to learn about the discipline. That can be tremendously useful. I agree with you. You cannot spend enough time talking to existing founders who have, again, put their foot into every bear trap. And so you may not have to have your foot in every one, but don't believe that you're going to get away with it without having some knocks. It's always going to be the case because every startup is unique. Whether it's in businesses that are sort of commonplace startup territory, or you're doing something that is absolutely unique, your business is unique because you are not the same as everyone else. So the startup cohort path can be very good, but it requires dedication. And if you fall off the requirements because life intervenes or what have you, you may lose the time that you invest because you don't get the most out of it. Right. So in other words, if the cohort requires 20 hours a week, you need to be prepared to spend that 20 hours a week. Shorting it does no one any good, because frankly, as part of a cohort, you are part of the education of others. And as a result, you're not essentially playing team ball if you don't do it. There are other types of incubators where that are perhaps a little more classical, where you join up, and it's almost like an office sharing model on steroids. And by the way, Luke, if I'm misstepping here, please jump in and say, hey, I haven't ever seen that.
No, not at all.
But these can be where you can just establish your business address at a well-known startup location, which can have great value. That can start conversations, etc. You can buy a little more, and you get some on-site time at shared desk space, and now you're interacting with the surface area of this incubator, so that you have access to services, access to other startup founders, access to expertise, and this is the real value: real contact with real innovators for, let's call it the startup in training. You have contact with startup founders who are doing it now, or who have done it, gone to an exit, and know the rocky path. I think that can be hugely valuable. You can also find incubators that are business specific. I believe in Chicago there will be upcoming or just opening up a security specific incubation type thing. And I'm shame on me for not remembering the specific title, but that's really unique in the world and really needed. And there you have the potential to be in contact with experts in the field, as well as even manufacturers, because they're not stupid. They're out there looking for new innovations, and they can be in these types of what I'll call additive service startup incubator environments. Luke, am I off the path there? Are we talking about things that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great insight into what to expect when you go into an accelerator or an incubator. I have a bit of a concern reading this post, because they're talking about how I'm at a dead still, not knowing which steps to take to get my ideas off the ground, considering an accelerator because of that reason. And I think there's kind of two components where that might be an issue. First of all, I think it would be pretty tricky to get into an incubator or an accelerator with just an idea. Incubators and accelerators are typically pretty selective. You have to at least have some preliminary traction and come in with a pretty concrete idea of what you're doing. And so on that front, you probably have to put in some more work before you're a candidate. And second of all, you were touching on this earlier, like be prepared to give up part of your company and really think about and evaluate when you're going through if it makes sense for, is this going to be an inflection point for you? Is this going to propel you to the next step? And I think there's a lot of work to be done for this founder before they start considering this. It sounds like they're really early stages and possibly even oscillating between a couple ideas. So what you need to do, what this poster needs to do now, is to be talking to everyone they can. They need to talk to people who they think might be using the product or service, get some feedback on that. Start getting, traction can look at a lot of different ways. Traction doesn't necessarily have to be monetary, it doesn't have to be users, but you need to come, if you decide that the accelerator incubator is the way to go, you need to present, I have talked to this many people, here's what they had to say. They said they would pay or would not pay, etc. What do you think about that?
I agree, and you also have to be able to concisely and confidently express the idea, and in a way that is what I'm going to call seasoned or vetted by your contact of just the type that you were talking about, Luke. You're absolutely right. Sometimes you have an idea that is absolutely clearly defined, and Nomad was one of them. I mean, I started building, and we had our first prototypes. This is not a first gen, but first prototype in a month. I knew what I wanted, and I wanted to be able to hand it to people. Now, that's a risk. I spent a fair bit of time and skill and some bucks on parts and so on to get this going, but I had something that I could hand to people and say, what do you think? And that's why I did the prototyping. In hardware, I love prototypes because you can hand it to people and immediately get a visceral reaction. what the heck is this? What are you doing? Or, oh, that's cool, tell me more. Depends on the nature of your idea, but I agree, Luke, 100% that if you're at the stage where you're not sure that, or you're stuck, you need to be confident in the idea enough to unstick, because you're going to get stuck in other places, funding being potentially one of them, most likely. I will say we've spent we're almost at the point of paying rent in the Valley of Death, as it's called, because funding is a unique challenge. You must be prepared for that, and you must not. If you're going to waver in your confidence downstream, that's a negative non-buy sign, so to speak. You've got to have bought your concept for you to be able to sell your concept. And so your plan, Luke, is right on the money, which is that put it in the hands in whatever way you can without giving away the store of your trusted circle, and see what they think, and see if you get what reactions you get, and talk to people who will be honest with you. You don't want to be the lovely young girl who is a singer and everybody in her family has told her that she's got a beautiful dulcet voice, and then she goes on The Voice and they gong her out of town. Can you tell I haven't watched the program much? But the concept is there. Talk to people who will be honest with you. The friendliest person in an early startup or idea context is the one who will punch you in the nose and say you are answering a question that nobody asked. Right? You don't squander your passion. You don't squander your resources. And we also have X amount of time on Earth, and you don't squander your time.
Very well said. And I'm glad you brought up your experience, because that's a nice segue. You're welcome for the unsolicited advice to this poster. But Gregg, tell the audience a little bit about what you're building with Nomad.
So Nomad is a way that we can essentially give our users the ability to, anyone really, to take the comfort and security of home and take it with them anywhere they travel. So the idea is, and that's where Nomad started, but it has grown into a useful resources for people to secure venues that they don't own or control. Personal safety, personal property, these things need to be protected, and it gives you back the autonomy that you somewhat surrender when you walk out into the world. As much as we have great advantages in the States and can be confident that everyday risk is relatively low, this is a landscape that is changing a little. And in addition, we rely on things that you can't always rely on. Certainly, you go into a hotel context and you want to stay, and you assume that you're going to have fire safety and no one in your room and so on. Do you know? Do you really know? And the answer is that you really don't. You have to take on faith that these things are being provided. It's very surprising, and we see little insights into this when people leave the hidden camera in their room and there are people in there who aren't supposed to be, or the fire safety system fails. There have been some notable cases where in what I'm going to call first order, you'd expect to be safe hotel and resort complexes where CO2 poisoning has been a challenge. That's scary stuff. It runs up on you fast and has massive personal safety implications. Wouldn't you like a system that would tell you based on what you're carrying with you as opposed to what's provided and required by law? That's just an example, but I kind of got off into the weeds there. But one of the challenges with Nomad is to limit it to X, Y, and Z use cases, because there are many applications. We've discovered that while we expected interest from professional security folks, there's a clamoring in people providing personal security to high net worth individuals or companies or venues, people who are selling security technology into the physical security space, and also security innovators, people who are creating technologies and have to pause at the precipice of creating everything but that last mile. So when you innovate at the edge, that's where your sweet spot is. That's where your secret sauce is. Now you have to make it connected. And that's where a lot of products start to fail, because you're reinventing the wheel again. Nomad is essentially an agnostic sensor hub that is hardened, that's small, that's diverse in its communication pathways, that's locally autonomous, so that you don't have to have dependency on the cloud. And yet the cloud provides compelling connectivity features. And we've wrapped that around what we feel is a cool design and a very useful tool in the physical security space. Fair enough?
It certainly is. And how can listeners connect with you?
The best way is to visit our website at getnomad.net, where you'll see a splash of what Nomad is all about. The topics or keywords that may be of interest to you are pods, which is our wireless sensor hub, our wireless sensor pods, or detachable elements that can be placed at security risk points. Other keywords are security to go, no screws in the box, that type of thing. There's media there that you can see a quick video on what Nomad's about, and there's also, we were very fortunate to have been very fortunate to be on podcasts like Startup Founder Daily, where you can get additional information.
Perfect. Well,
and
Gregg,
as you can tell, I love to talk, so we have one interview that went on for an hour and 3/4. If you've got the chops, there's more in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly go check out those resources. And by the time this episode comes out, we'll have just featured Nomad and Security in Motion on our site. So go check out those features. But Gregg, once again, thank you so much for being on the show.
Such a pleasure. Really appreciate the time and the insight.
Yeah, likewise. Talk soon. Thanks.
Thank you.
The Backseat Startup Podcast is brought to you by Startup Founder Daily, a media company focused on early stage companies. To learn more or apply to be featured for free, head over to startupfounderdaily.com. You can find the link in the description below.